The Pittsburgh Steelers are not Super Bowl bound, but the teams that are, they put them in a hole. And now the Steelers are faced with a choice that I think is going to be very interesting and one that I do not think fans are going to like, but would have been much easier to work around if yesterday was different. What's going on, everybody? I'm Noah Strackbine. Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. Find us on youtube.com/all Steelers talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers continue their offensive coordinator search this weekend, interviewing former Atlanta Falcons head coach Arthur Smith. And for the first time, it became very interesting because fans made it very clear, at least those on social media, or a good chunk of those on social media, made it very clear that the Pittsburgh Steelers should not hire Smith. They should not take on a guy who had weapons in Drake London and Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts last season and was unable to really do much of anything. And the quarterback situation didn't get any better no matter who they tried at the position last season. And really, Arthur Smith is a guy that I think people have lost a lot of faith in since leaving the Tennessee Titans. And don't get me wrong, the Tennessee Titans in his time with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill, it showed a lot. In my opinion, his time as an offensive coordinator, he was impressive. He made life very simple and very easy for Ryan Tannehill, of which it has since become much more difficult. Derrick Henry, obviously, but they were a very good zone running team. And I think the Pittsburgh Steelers should adapt that style of play, because you talk about teams like the San Francisco 49ers or the Los Angeles Rams, the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree or the Sean McVay coaching tree. Those are zone run offenses. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers to adapt some of that, I think is a good idea. That being said, I'm not on the Arthur Smith train. I'm not sitting around saying that they should hire him or trying to convince you that they should hire him. What I'm saying is that he is the first name who, in my opinion, could be hired by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is the first name that I believe becomes a little bit pressing. He is the first name that is such a hot candidate that if the Steelers do want him and they are worried that they will miss out on maybe their number one guy and he is their number two, they will go and get their number two in Arthur Smith. And why is that more difficult right now? Because at halftime of the San Francisco 49ers Detroit Lions playoff game yesterday, you started to think, man, the Steelers are about to interview Clint Kubiak. They are about to go get their top dog. They are about to go and get an opportunity to speak with somebody who I think most of the fan base, at least those that are really, really digging into the offensive coordinator search themselves, have agreed should be their top option and should be the guy that they should be hunting for. And really any team who needs an offensive coordinator should be hunting for. And that's where they stand. And at halftime of yesterday, you started thinking, man, it could happen soon. This could be the week. The Steelers are about to head to Mobile, Alabama, but they would make sure that they were capable of interviewing guys that they needed to interview before or after or during, and Kubiak would most certainly be in that group. That was the thought. And then halftime was over. The 49ers started going off. The Lions started falling. And here we are waiting not 1, but 2 weeks. And things are about to get very, very interesting. Very, very interesting over those next 2 weeks. Because, man, the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they do not request to interview this guy, and they do not look to interview him before his season is over, which they certainly looked like they were not going to up until this point. Nobody looked like they were going to up until this point. And it's hard to say that anybody on a staff, and I get it, that history will tell me I'm wrong, but it's hard to say that anybody on a staff who is looking to win a Super Bowl right now is going to take time off to interview with coaching or with other teams for offensive coordinator positions, especially when they believe that they will be that high on the list of candidates for a number of teams. Kubiak will be top dog, top guy for whoever is left, whoever still has an opening. And maybe that will be the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I thought they would wait it out up until this point. I thought that they would say, Gerard Johnson, good candidate, but who knows? We already lost Zach Robinson. He was probably our top choice, but that's okay. Thomas Brown, good guy, has interest from other teams. So does Johnson. But how real is any of that interest? And is it that bad if we lose them? And I thought it was, okay, they'll be able to lose any of them and they'll be able to move on. Arthur Smith strikes me as a guy that fits what the Pittsburgh Steelers want to do. They want to make life very easy for Kenny Pickett or whoever their quarterback is, but they're hoping it's Kenny Pickett. He could make life very easy for him. He obviously knows what to do in a running game, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are a running football team, whether you want to admit it or not. That will forever be their identity. That is what Art Rooney loves to do. That is what Mike Tomlin loves to do. And yes, it goes against what I have preached and what I have said, and I think a lot of other analysts have said about how the Steelers should approach their offensive coordinator candidacy this offseason. It should be the complete opposite. Who is just a dominant offensive coach in the complete opposite realm of what the Pittsburgh Steelers already do? That is who they should be approaching. But doesn't mean they're going to listen. It doesn't mean that they're going to sit around and not look at Arthur Smith and say, man, this guy does everything we want him to do and more. It's going to be very interesting. For the first time, I think that we could sit here and have some angst that they are going to mess up their offensive coordinator search. And I think a lot of fans would agree that would be messing it up. That would be, you started high. You started with the Zach Robinson. There were reports of Cliff Kingsbury, which was up there as well. Thomas Brown, shooting for the stars with a young offensive mind who has plenty of potential behind him. Gerard Johnson, quarterback coach, quarterback whisperer, all the love from CJ Stroud. Maybe that's your guy. And then you go Arthur Smith. You go the guy that does exactly what the Steelers would do, who didn't have success last season, who hasn't had success since he took on the head coaching job, who struggled with quarterbacks, who struggled with young running backs, who failed to get creative for some guys that are uber talented, who couldn't lead his team to a winning season. That's who they would hire because he fits the bill. He's who the Pittsburgh Steelers could look at as a guy who is exactly what they need on offense. The same thing. A lot of the old. A lot of what the Pittsburgh Steelers already do. Man, they are in a tight spot. And Dan Campbell kicking a couple of field goals, no matter how you feel about that situation, would have kept them out of that spot, most likely. Would have allowed them to get an opportunity at a guy that completely changes the culture, completely changes everything about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive side of the football. Now they are sitting here. Things become very troublesome. And if you are counting the days, you should be watching Twitter. You should be watching your news feeds. You should be looking at your emails. You should be checking Google at all times. Why? Because I think that the offensive coordinator was very, very slow buildup and was going to last a long time. And Arthur Smith just spiked it right up and said, hey, somebody else calls me with a job offer. Maybe I will call the Pittsburgh Steelers. Maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers will call him. Who knows? But the clock is starting to tick. It was not ticking before. And that is worrisome if you are somebody who does not want Arthur Smith and is hoping that the Pittsburgh Steelers hold out for Clint Kubiak. Now they got to hold out another 2 weeks.